याद रहेंगे makeMyTrip.com के साथ बिताए पल, क्योंकि जब हो अनोखे पैकेजेस, डील्स और एक्सपीरियंसेस तो यादें तो बनती जाएंगी।
बेटा महेश, नाम याद आया?
मेक माय ट्रिप।
स्पोर्ट्स के रेस ट्रैक में तो ऐसे हर्डल्स पार करना मेरे लिए ज्यादा मुश्किल नहीं है, लेकिन जिंदगी के हर्डल्स पार करने के लिए कुछ स्पेशल टैलेंट और सपोर्ट की जरूरत है। एक ऐसा स्पेशल सपोर्ट जो मेरे पास है, जो मुझे अलग अलग हर्डल्स को पार करने की शक्ति देता है और जिंदगी की रेस में जिता देता है। जिंदगी की रेस में जीतना हो ऐसा तो बैंक हो तो ऐसा।
कॉर्पोरेशन बैंक,
बैंक हो तो ऐसा।
This is the Times Television Network, and you're watching ETNOW.
Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. I come to you from Bretton Woods in New Hampshire in the United States of America. Bretton Woods has had huge historical relevance. In 1944, this is exactly where the Bretton Woods Conference came over in order to move away from the gold standard and bring in what would be the new norms in monetary and fiscal policies across the world, including the introduction of a currency that would be then benchmark against the United States dollar in terms of purchasing power parity. That said, will 1944 repeat itself at Bretton Woods II? Bretton Woods II is being organized by INET, which is really the policy think tank funded by George Soros. There is big demand about how there is a need to balance the power and economic equation and move away from 1944, when a handful of developed economies put out what could be the new monetary standard. Today, as Asia has a big role to play, where is this monetary story headed? Will we actually see a new economic thinking in a new political reality? Take a look at the big agenda that we're tracking for you on the show. Many big questions that we're going to raise will come to you through the voices of my special guests. George Soros is the one person who wants to bring in more state intervention in today's financial markets. At many levels, he believes there has been faster growth and higher corporate profitability, but none of that reflects on the way the real world economy has changed in the post-recessionary scenario. What exactly does he mean by state intervention? Where does Asia fit in his assessment? Let's listen to George Soros in an exclusive interview to me at Bretton Woods.
India's importance in the world has definitely risen as a member of the G20, but since its economy is growing and it has considerable potential because it's coming from a very, very low base, over 1 billion people, not growing as fast as China, but perhaps not as exposed to overheating as China is. So India is actually relatively very well situated.
We're talking about building a new reality, bringing economic and political balances. How do you define the idea that you right now are propagating at Bretton Woods II?
Well, different people have different ideas, and this is a conference that brings them all together. I have one particular way of looking at it, but that is not necessarily shared by all the other people here.
What is that sort of economic order that you see emerging? And given the state of the world today, which is somewhat getting into recovery mode, how confident are you of this new idea emerging?
Very much so, and I think that we are now in a period of great confusion, because when financial markets were globalized, then that globalization was connected with deregulation, and that spread like wildfire, like a virus, because once the major countries were liberalized, then capital would go to the countries where it was not regulated and not taxed. And as a result, the other countries had to follow suit. But that was a false idea, that markets will correct their own excesses, and you can really allow markets to operate without regulation. Now you have to regulate, and that is a much more difficult thing, because different countries have different interests, and to coordinate those interests is extremely difficult. And so you have a battle going on between the various interests, the various special interests, financial interests, and national interests. And you see clashes developing. There are different views between, let's say, China and the United States. There are different views between the United States and Europe.
Then my question to you is that what sort of an economic balance that you're seeking could then sort of put out more critical political ideas into play and eventually have an impact that works in a cycle? So we go from an economic balance that triggers an ideal political economy and eventually has an impact on the way businesses function.
You need to find coordination among the major countries, and that is very difficult to attain, and I'm afraid the outlook is not very positive, because at the height of the crisis the G20 emerged, and because of the fear generated by the crisis, there was a willingness to work together. And in the first big meeting in London, Gordon Brown, who was very actively engaged in it, put together a package for $1 trillion. Right. That was the finest achievement of the G20. Since then, as the economy sort of the financial markets calmed down, the willingness to cooperate has also dissipated, and you now have a gradual erosion. So from the G20, you are now moving to the G0.
I also caught up with Rob Johnson, who is the man behind INET, the think tank that's trying to execute or initiate the new economic thinking. Asia, while it's big on their radar, they do have a lot of tasks in terms of building consensus in the developed world itself.
Asia is the growing and most important new vital region in the world, and how that integrates with the developed countries is very important, whether it's in the goods market, whether it's impacting the commodities market, or whether it has to do with the financial markets. In particular, at this conference, we're going to have a session on the opening of Asian financial markets, whether it's a good idea for the Asian people, particularly in India and China, and secondly, whether it is a smooth transition, what kind of rules, what kind of institutions need to be built as a prelude to that opening. I know many of the Western banks would love to have a big market share in India or China, but whether that destabilizes an economy, that many people live close to a subsistence level where commodity prices, food prices, and changes in the exchange rate can be very socially disruptive, we have to take all of those things into consideration.
How challenging do you think it's going to be to actually build a consensus? Because to me, this seems like something that is coming in as a Bretton Woods II in theory. But truly speaking, it is going to have challenges to bring everyone on board. We do know there are a large number of other factions who may not necessarily be on the same lines on INET, are not in agreement with the idea of a second Bretton Woods initiated by INET and Soros.
I would say we're very close to the starting point, which is the investigation, the exploration of what possibilities exist. I don't think we're anywhere near a consensus at this time.
How do you interpret the idea that this is actually a clash of financial civilizations? Because at some level or the other, there's the state, there's the private sector, and you don't necessarily find an easy way to get them both together. So you are prepared that there will be huge disagreement on the way, and we today are at the start of that.
I think that there will be a clash on that front. I think people on left and right in many different countries, people have very different philosophies. We have a lot of creative thinkers at this conference, but they don't all agree about the role of government. Some say, and I think many say after the crisis, that unfettered free markets are not stable by themselves. The illusion of stable markets has been punctured by the crisis. But then to reach out and say immediately, what we need to do is have the government fix it, is kind of, in many views, romantic. And in the United States in particular, people after the bailouts view the government like it's an insurance agency for the rich and powerful. And they say, let's just cut them off. You're looking at a budget crisis right now in Washington. They unfold this evening. People are not trusting the government to be the solution. The government is just as fallible as the markets. In this conference, partly because it's international and it's beyond the scope of any given country, and partly because of flaws in structure, we are looking at what I will call to puncture the illusion of control. Governments are not entirely in control of what's happening in the economy, and their tools aren't working right, whether it's monetary policy or fiscal policy or financial regulation. That's really the major theme of this conference. Is government fallible? Is, in your way of framing it, is the cure worse than the disease if you bring government in? We have no consensus at this time on what the right direction is.
How much of an issue is building that free state versus market access balance? I mean, at various levels, we do know that you do want state government, or, state/government interference or support. That's the theory that INET wants to put out. But it's not easy for a free market to get very comfortable with that. We've seen it during the crisis.
Well, we have a time where people's romance about the free market has been shattered, where their romance about the government fixing problems has been shattered, and experts have been largely discredited for their blindness to during the approach and the unfolding of the crisis. So it is a very difficult and a very challenging time. People are in a lot of pain.
In Dubai, lives converge and opportunity abounds. It's just a question of where and when.
And the nominations. And the award goes to...
In Dubai, every day is an opportunity.
Welcome back. You're with ET Now, coming to you from Bretton Woods. That's right, the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference was held at this very venue. But are we ready for the next big change, the big leap in new economic thinking? Is this going to be a new financial order? I caught up with Kenneth Rogoff talking about